Welcome back to my Harry Potter and Classics series. In this, the second episode, I am going to be talking to you about the Chamber of Secrets and all of the characters and creatures who are introduced in this story that take inspiration in some form or another, whether it be name or characteristics that stem from either Greek or Roman mythology or history. If you haven't seen the first episode of the series where I explore all of the characters that are introduced in the Philosopher's Stone, which is quite a few given that it is the setup for the whole series, then I will of course link it down below for you to check out, and the introduction to this series if you'd like to know a little bit more about where it stems from. But without further ado, let's get into the characters. Let's begin with one of the few human characters that takes their name from a mythological figure in this book. That is Penelope Clearwater. Yes, you may recognise Penelope's name as she was the girlfriend of Percy Weasley, one of Ron's many siblings, and a Ravenclaw. She's not a particularly central character throughout the stories, but we do hear her name cropping up every now and then. And she does of course take her name from a mythological figure, quite an important mythological figure in the Greek canon in fact, and that is Penelope, the wife of Odysseus. She's the daughter of Icarius, who was a Spartan king, and the uncle of Helen, making Penelope the cousin of Helen of Troy. Everyone's interconnected in Greek myths. So Icarius was a famed runner, and he wouldn't let anybody marry his daughter unless he was able to defeat him in a race. In comes Odysseus. Odysseus makes a deal with Helen's father in that he will assist him in getting the hand of Penelope if he helps Helen's father in search of a suitor for his daughter. Naturally, for this story to continue, Odysseus succeeds in defeating Penelope's father and takes her as a wife. He does not, however, decide to stay in Sparta and returns to his home kingdom of Ithaca, taking Penelope with him. Together they bear one son, Telemachus. Unfortunately, whilst their son is still very young, Odysseus goes off with the rest of the Greek heroes to fight against the Trojans in the Trojan War, led by the brothers Agamemnon and Menelaus in search of Menelaus's wife. Whilst the Trojan War rampages on, Penelope waits for her husband at home. After the Trojan War ends, however, Odysseus then takes many additional years to return to her, travelling across the seas to return to his wife and his home, being stopped by many different obstacles that are put in his way, many of which are a result of a feud between Odysseus and the god Poseidon. This is not about Odysseus, however. So in the 20 years that Odysseus is away, what's happening with Penelope? Well, Penelope is left to rule Ithaca with her son, who gradually ages over time until he becomes a man too. In between the end of the Trojan War and Odysseus' return home, which takes over 10 years, many suitors come to Ithaca in the hopes of wooing Penelope and thus becoming the king of Ithaca themselves, all saying that Odysseus has died at sea and that he will never return home. Penelope, however, throughout this time remains loyal to her husband and does not take any new lovers. She famously subdues these suitors from forcing themselves upon her and for her to make a decision by weaving a tapestry. Now, how does she do this? She promises the suitors that once she has finished this tapestry, she will indeed pick one of them to become her king. However, despite making progress on her project every day, she then spends the nights unravelling the progress she has made so that she never manages to finish the tapestry, thus stalling until Odysseus returns home. That's not to say she is not racked with doubt as to whether Odysseus really is going to come back or not, and you definitely see some of that tension in the Odyssey by Homer, which is one of the major sources for Penelope's story and one of the pieces of classical literature where she is one of the central characters. Notably, throughout Greek and Roman history, Penelope is very much held up as a paragon of the ideal wife, often in contrast with Helen. Moving on, however, to our second character, we are going to talk about Hermes the Owl, another character closely tied to Percy Weasley, in fact. Hermes is Percy's owl that his parents buy him as a reward, and in the wizarding world we all know that owls are used to deliver post. However, in ancient Greek mythology, Hermes is in fact a god. The Greek god Hermes being synonymous with the Roman god Mercury. Like all of the gods, he had a multitude of roles. Most famously, he's probably known as the messenger god. He also was the trickster and played a role in chaperoning the recently deceased to the afterworld. In addition to this, he was also the patron of roads and travellers. Because of his role as the messenger god, he is often depicted in art and statues as having winged sandals or a winged cap, perhaps making him particularly apt as the namesake of an owl. Like all of the gods, he appears in a vast array of classical literature. You'll find him in plays like the Oresteia by Aeschylus, where he assists Orestes in killing his mother, Clytemnestra. He also appears in the big works by names like Homer and Hesiod and various other works. He is also, like many of the Olympian gods, the son of Zeus. Next up for characters introduced in the Chamber of Secrets, we have Aurora Sinistra, who takes her name from the Roman goddess Aurora, or Eos in Greek mythology. Aurora Sinistra is the teacher of astronomy at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and Aurora in Roman mythology is the goddess of dawn. She is the daughter of two titans, making her the contemporary of Zeus, king of the Olympian gods. You'll find mention of her in works like Hesiod or Ovid's Fasti, and some of her more famous children include Boreas, who is the wind. Unfortunately for Aurora, however, in one of her tales, her beauty inspires the love of Ares or Mars, which angers the goddess Venus or Aphrodite, who is also Mars's lover. In order to simultaneously distract and punish Aurora for attracting the love of Mars, Venus makes her fall in love with a mortal Tithonus. Aurora and Tithonus marry, but of course Tithonus is not immortal like the goddess. Because of this, she begs Zeus to turn her husband into an immortal like her, so that they can both live together forever. Of course, nothing ever seems to go right when it comes to love in Greek or Roman mythology, and Zeus takes her quite literally, with some caveats. Tithonus does, yes, become immortal, but he also continues to age, making him forever old. As Tithonus continues to unendingly age, the gods eventually take pity on him and turn him into an insect. Now next up, I want to talk about a creature in the Chamber of Secrets that takes a little bit more of a loose inspiration from classical mythology, but one that's always struck me as interesting, and that is the Basilisk. Yes, the giant magical serpent which lives beneath Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in special chambers created by Salazar Slytherin. Throughout Harry's second year at Hogwarts, the Basilisk is responsible for petrifying many characters throughout the story. However, if these characters had looked directly into the Basilisk's eyes, they would in fact have died. Now, the Basilisk isn't a creature created solely by J.K. Rowling, and it has various different origin stories, including potentially coming from the Bible. However, the Basilisk not being specifically classical doesn't mean it's not relevant to this video, because what does this remind you of? Perhaps it reminds you of Medusa. Medusa was a legendary Greek monster, a woman turned into a gorgon with snakes for hair, and whenever anybody looked into her eyes, they were turned to stone, effectively ending their life. Petrification turned to stone, snakes, are we seeing the connection? Now, to tell the tale of Medusa is not a happy story. Medusa, in some versions of the myth, was in fact just an ordinary mortal woman to begin with, but a particularly beautiful one. An affliction which never ends well in Greek mythology. One day when she is out looking at her reflection in the water, Poseidon spots her and takes a fancy to her. Of course, in mythology, the gods are never denied their wants when it comes to mortals, and he assaults Medusa sexually in the temple of Athena. Athena, enraged by the desecration of her temple but unable to punish her fellow god, takes her wrath out on the mortal Medusa, turning her into the monstrous Gorgon, in effect ending her beauty. Not only has Medusa now become this terrifying beast who turns any man or woman who looks upon her into stone. Athena sets the Greek hero Perseus on a mission to slay her. Perseus manages to achieve this feat by using his shield to see where Medusa is and avoid looking directly into her eyes. When he does cut off the head of the Gorgon, ending her life, 2 children are actually born from the blood that falls from her neck. One being the legendary winged horse Pegasus, and the other a baby boy Chrysaor. You can read one version of Medusa's story in Ovid's Metamorphosis if you're interested in learning more. But next I want to briefly mention another creature who we are introduced to in the Chamber of Secrets and takes its origins from Greek mythology, that being Fox the Phoenix. The bird that never dies but simply decomposes at the end of one life and is reborn from the ashes anew. Depictions of the phoenix haven't strikingly changed throughout the centuries, and in fact the phoenix you'll find in classical texts like Herodotus, Pliny the Elder and Ovid aren't strikingly different from the character of Fox in the Chamber of Secrets. So other than pointing out the origins of the creature, there's perhaps not much else to say about Fox in this video. But I do have one more character to mention, and it is in fact another creature, which this video is very heavy on. So let us round things off with Aragog, the giant spider or great friend of Hagrid that lives within the Forbidden Forest. Aragog is part of a race in Harry Potter known as Acromantula, giant sentient spiders, and my connection here may again be somewhat tenuous, but when you know that J.K. Rowling has a classics degree, it's hard not to think that some of these stories were in the back of her mind. So in comparison to Aragog, I want to mention the character of Arachne. Perhaps you can already see the connection. Arachne was the daughter of a shepherd in ancient Greek mythology who was amazing at weaving and in fact compared her own skill to that of the goddess Athena. Now you never compare yourself to a goddess or undermine their skill. So offended by Arachne's lack of homage to herself, the goddess of weaving, Athena challenges her to a contest. In response to this challenge, Arachne weaves a tapestry depicting the misdeeds of the gods, the horrendous actions they perpetrate towards mortals, including sexual offences committed by their king Zeus. Upon seeing this tapestry and the pictures it contained, as well as the skill it showed, Athena was in a rage. Terrified of the goddess's wrath, Arachne hung herself. But Athena was not done there. In fact, in order to punish the young woman further, she brought her back to life, but not as a human, instead as a spider, who would have to go on for all eternity weaving. Again, this story is one you can find in Ovid's Metamorphosis. Funny that all of the stories containing metamorphosis can be found in the Metamorphosis. But I do hope you've enjoyed the second instalment of Harry Potter and the Classics and perhaps learnt a few new myths that you didn't know beforehand, or are in fact going to even check out some of the pieces of ancient literature I've mentioned in this video to learn a little bit more. If you haven't seen episode 1, again, I will link it down below for those of you that want to check it out. I will hopefully be coming to you soon with my 3rd episode on Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which, just let me tell you, contains some of my favourite characters as well as some brilliant myths and historical references. So look forward to that. That's all for now though, so happy reading and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!